a lot of the logic behind me pursuing fighting, and in particular those combat martial arts like Muay Thai and Ju-Jitsu, is because I really enjoy the challenge. I really enjoy the um, sharpening of the sword, so to speak.
Hmm.
I like um, I like to go in there and grind it out. I like the fact that it's tough. That I go in there and like you put all of your sweat out, um, and it's to me it feels a lot more physical than like say a weight workout does. Um, don't get me wrong, I love lifting weights, but the grind that you do when you do Thai boxing or you do jujitsu is a totally different type of grind, and the feeling that you get after it is a lot different to what I would get from other sports.
I feel like the grinding aspect might be a lot to do with the fact that you're competing directly with someone else. Like the harder they push, the harder you push,
Yeah.
and it obviously it's a feedback as as one person keeps pushing, the other has to keep pushing further, so it becomes more and
Mm.
more of a grind. Whereas a weight workout, you can really push yourself, but there's not the same kind of jeopardy.
Yeah, and also the fact that like there's someone pushing you as well. So like I don't know. I mean, the feeling I would get after sparring sessions is like almost. I mean, depends what kind of sparring session it is. If it's one where I just got my ass whooped, then obviously I probably won't feel super great about it. But even when I got my ass whooped, like my what's the word? Got my ass handed to me. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, that works.
um, then even then, I feel like it's almost like a euphoric feeling that I overcame the struggle in the round of like during that round I was totally exhausted. I didn't have any energy, but I still kept going, and it's like a small victory, and that kind of propels you.
Is that why you need fighting though, for that little small bit of euphoria?
Hmm. Yeah, whether I need it, I'm not sure, but it definitely is something that draws me to it. um, I think some people might use it as a way to vent. I'm not sure if that's healthy or not. I can't say yes or no. I'm personally I'm not sure. It might be a good idea. Obviously, if you're being smart about it
I
and not
think that very
trying.
much depends on the effect that you're causing. If you're
Mm,
using it to vent in the way that you'll actually end up hurting other people, no, probably not.
yeah,
It's probably something that's going to feed into probably a bad attitude in general. But if you're doing it in the same way that someone might run to vent, then perhaps it's much more healthy. It's a good outlet for it, and I think a lot of people use it as a sort of psychological coping mechanism. People use it a lot for depression and anxiety. They use
yeah.
training in general, like we spoke about in a previous podcast, not just combat sports. But kind of what I'm wondering at the moment, though, is if you're saying you need something to put, okay, you need something to push you. You
Mm.
need it to be physically exhausting, and you need to really overcome some odds. Why doesn't something like why doesn't something like running, racing, do that for you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've tried running. I actually trained like for like a solid 3 months for an ultra marathon. I like decided to do a 50K ultra marathon in the hills of Wales for no apparent reason other than to challenge myself. Having no previous experience of doing a marathon, so I just went in like deep waters. I was like, "Fuck it, I'm
Hmm.
gonna do it." so, so I have got a bit of experience there, and although you do get a similar it's very straining on the mind, particularly when you're doing the longer runs, like 3 hours or something. It gets freaking hard. But yeah, I don't know. It's the risk factor associated with it as well. Like the fact that you've got someone trying to take your head off, or someone trying to rip your limb, um,
Mm, mm,
is kind of perhaps adds a bit more intensity to it and adds a bit of thrill to it. Because as you were talking, I was kind of thinking to myself, I don't really pursue fighting to feel confident, like not consciously. I don't do it because I want to feel confident, or I want to um use it for self-defense. Like that's not my decision to do it. I know that it is for a lot of people, and it's a um good point, uh a good goal for doing fight sports. um but for me, that's not necessarily why I do it.
I feel like that's more of an angle on why to train, though, which I think is a bit different from the point of fighting.
Yeah, you're right. That's
You
true.
know, like we did before, like the reasons for training, and a lot of those do feed into the same reasons for fighting. Fighting a
Mm.
lot of the time is a motivation for your extra training. But I guess kind of what I'm wondering is if you got the fitness, like the fitness aspect is all to do with training, self defense all to do with training, community aspect all to do with training. Uh, doing a fight is a lot of sacrifice on your body and on your time. Doing a fight camp
Yeah.
is having something that's is having that extra push, that extra pressure from the fight worth what you're putting into it.
Yeah, I guess that's really a personal question. To me, um well, the euphoria you get after a fight as well, it's something that I think a lot of people use as a driver, and kind of where they find the purpose in some ways. I've heard many fighters say that, that they just they love the anxiety, and they love, especially after you've had the fight, like the feeling you get after you've finished.
Hmm.
It's pretty difficult to find in other places, to be honest. I like extreme sports. Like I've done a lot of mountain biking. You do some crazy jumps. Like I've done freestyle skiing. But the feeling I got after a fight is it's quite different. It's a bit difficult to describe, but I mean it is similar to those feelings of thrill and like post adrenaline, but it's not the same. Um, yeah, I can't really quantize it, or quantify it in the way that would make sense.
So, for a bit of background, then, how many Muay Thai fights have you done?
um, I haven't had any professional fights.
No, no, of course.
Um, I've done about like what was it, three like interclubs,
Hmm.
and one slightly more serious interclub.
Interclubs are still a fight. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
it's just a lower consequence. It's still a fight.
you still have the same anxiety, I think, and the feeling you get afterwards. Like you still have, I don't
Uh,
remember that much from the fight, so it had
I,
the right effect.
yeah, I could say that. I think an interclub is a fight. Like it's just a lower it's a lower tier level.
Yeah,
Like you can't say that you've not fought because you've never done a professional MMA bout,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Um, and are you planning on fighting Muay Thai again?
I am actually
Oh.
one thing that I'm really still like um wanting to do is to do at least a C class fight once in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that like because I would like to, for one time in my life, experience going shin on shin. And a little bit, obviously no elbows and so on, but it's
Hmm.
still, it's a that extra level up. And I think the level of competition tends to be a bit more serious as well, when it comes to C class. So I
And
think it definitely is something that I want to do, and the purpose there that I'm finding is, again, it's like a personal challenge. So yeah, I wonder if that's that's like a driver. Like, what is your, what do you think your reason is?
well, I don't know, because sometimes I'm kind of unsure, and that's
Hmm.
kind of why I ended up, because I said to you when you suggested the topic that I hadn't really collected my thoughts on it. I did think about it for a while. I was like, I don't really know. Um,
Hmm.
but this might take this off a little bit of a tangent. But how does this fit into? Okay, so you're a stoic, right?
Yeah, it's in some ways.
In some ways, all right. So do you fit really solidly with like stoic values? Would you say? Are they a lot of
I
the
try
values?
to. I've definitely think it has a shit ton of merit, and I really believe in a lot of the things that the Stoics have said. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, how do you think like fighting fits into the stoic values then? Maybe it doesn't work perfectly with you because you're not purely a stoic,
Yeah,
but
but I think there is, in some ways, the I think the Stoics in some ways definitely sought struggle.
mhm,
Um, like there are, like, Seneca mentions it quite a few times, and I think, if you want to, you can kind of use that. You can use fighting as a form of finding your own struggle, um, because, I guess it kind of makes life a bit more juicy if you've had the time to struggle.
yeah,
Um, it's just not making yourself too comfortable, and I think that's a Stoic idea. So that's maybe one where it would apply.
mhm.
Um, what's another one? Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, the reason I bring it up is I feel like it's interesting to see how these ideas actually fit into people's personal philosophies in their life. Um,
Hmm.
and I can say all these benefits about fight training. I think I do get a lot of benefits out of them. Um, confidence. It's a story to talk about apart from anything else.
True.
It's it's of interest to me in the sport in general, and having experience of fights directly feeds into that. And I feel like, honestly, I feel like if I have 5, 6, 7 fights, if we continue to do this podcast for 10 years, after I've done
Hopefully.
those, yeah, after I've done those 5 or 6 fights, I don't need to do any more, but I've already got that grounding in the sport and that experience that my
Mm,
viewpoints will be more legit. But
mm,
all of these benefits, I could say them, but I never signed up for a fight being like, you know what, this fight will give me this thing, and
mm.
it's not career for me, right?
Yeah.
I like the idea of sort of when I see UFC fighters enter a huge arena of people and have them all
Yeah.
screaming, that is exciting. And I'm like,
Of
that
course.
would be sick if I did that. And if that was
Of
me,
course. Yeah.
that'd be amazing, right? So that's like kind of a motivator in a way, more so than the money, because I do not ever believe that I'm going to be like a champion UFC fighter. Quite frankly, most
Hmm.
UFC fighters get crap money and then can't live on it,
Yeah.
right?
Very true.
And a lot of fighters finish and have nothing to go back on, right?
Mm.
Um, you have some who are a lucky few, but a lot of fighters just never get out of the game. That's and it's kind of sad. So it's a pretty bad career move in a lot of ways. If you can hit the top,
Yeah.
great. But if you can't, you damage yourself. You spend so much time doing it. Um, so again, I never signed up for a fight being like, in 10 years' time, I can make huge amounts of money. Like, I'm not a prize fighter. And that is
Yeah. Yeah.
and that is a legit, and I respect that. And that is a legitimate reason for people to sign up for fights. And it's a real benefit
Sure.
for people to fight for getting out of poverty. And it's why,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of people use that,
right?
especially Brazilian fighters. I think.
Yeah, of course. And it's performative. Okay, it is a performance in a certain way, and
Hmm.
people get out of poverty using it in the same way that they use music to get out of poverty, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
The thing is, I've been born to a pretty privileged scenario.
Yeah.
I,
Same.
I've had a good education. I most likely will make a lot more money doing something that's not fighting. Um, and yet it interests me.
Yeah.
And it interests me to go and do it. And again, I can think of all these benefits, but I never signed up for fighting for these benefits. And I was trying to think of why it fits into sort of my own personal philosophy. And to be honest, I think more than anything, I'm kind of a nihilist.
Okay.
So,
Interesting. Yeah.
you know what a nihilist is?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
So it kind of just developed from me being pretty atheistic. Not only like I don't really believe in a god or spirits or
Sure.
anything,
Yeah.
but further to that, I don't really believe in. I don't really think that anything's got an inherent meaning unto itself. I find the Stoic values interesting, but I think they're all a personal choice. If you're really hardcore Stoic, your attitude is probably that these are the best values and these are real things.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Of course.
If you're a
Most
hardcore
people
Stoic,
see it that way. Yeah.
I don't really think that that's very likely, though. I don't think all of the Stoic ideas are social constructs.
Hmm.
And in that same way, if there was no society, they wouldn't exist. And in a different society, different values might exist. They might have the same words. Some of these values may have different properties. And so in the end, I end up being quite a nihilist and not believing that anything has an inherent value. So,
But can you not still use them as like a guiding principle, or
yeah,
would you then say that that's you'd then believe in those values, therefore it's kind of not nihilistic in that respect?
yeah. Well, I guess that's how I ended up kind of struggling with it because
Mm.
even though I can logically argue that to myself that none of this means anything inherently, there was an interesting idea I saw that I got introduced to through Rick and Morty, which is a very nihilistic show, and actually they have
Oh, of
some
course, yeah.
really interesting philosophical ideas. Um, you know the episode where do you watch it? Well,
Yeah,
a
of
lot,
course, yeah,
right?
I'm a big boy.
Do you know the episode where Beth discovers the magical world
Oh
where,
yeah, that was great. Yeah.
and at the end she gets given the choice because she's kind of at the end she kind of realizes that nothing means anything
Hmm.
and it's all pointless, and like Rick she sort of really embraces the nihilism.
Yeah.
So nothing means anything, including her family and all of her values, and yet and she gets given the option, go and explore the universe and do everything you want to do. And instead, what she does is she says, no, I'm going to stay here because I'm going to decide that my family is important.
Hmm.
And
So it's your
that,
own decision. It's not.
yeah, there is no
Yeah.
inherent value to anything. So you can
Yeah.
decide what's important. And it's called the absurd hero. because it's the kind of the idea that you realize nothing means anything, and yet you also realize, but then you can decide what means something. And I'm not
Hmm.
saying that fighting is, in my opinion, like the most important thing in the world to do. I'm not saying that everyone has, like, I'm not saying that I value it above everything else.
Yeah.
Kind of the conclusion I came to was that it doesn't necessarily have to mean anything. I can just decide
Yeah.
that it's important.
That's very true, mate. That's very true. I don't disagree with that. I mean, I can't disagree with that in any way, really. I mean, why does it? Why does it have to have an inherent value, right?
Yeah, and there's all sorts of
I
values you
guess
could
as
apply.
humans, I guess we tend to try and look for these things, but yeah, maybe it's just yeah, I'm just
Maybe
doing
it,
it.
maybe it just is, and
Yeah,
that's why it's good. And I found it
yeah,
interesting to look at the way that the way that sports and fighting, as an extension, has sort of filled in gaps in our society. Um, it gives us the tribes and sort of
yes,
these weird societal proxy wars that we don't have, these battles that we don't have, right?
yeah,
You
it's very true.
look at football games. People paint their faces. People have their chants. I mean, for God's sake, at the start of a rugby game, the New Zealand team does a bloody
Yeah, the
haka,
hacker.
right?
Yeah,
Um, and I wonder if what fighting kind of does is fill in a gap that we need as humans. And
mm,
and and though I said all that stuff about nihilism, I think that's maybe thing, the one core thing that fighting does do, and that fighters do. They kind of play the role of heroes that maybe as humans we just need in our society, or maybe nothing means anything at all.
yeah, maybe, but I think in some respects that must be true. Especially because of how we've always throughout centuries have had these sorts of heroes,
Hmm.
right? They tend to be obviously in the sense of fighting, and actually I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I was going to say that they tend to be men. um but I think you've probably had some historical, like, really strong women
I think there are
that have
plenty. Look at
and there have been good
Boadicea or
exa-
Joan of Arc.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I don't necessarily think it's a sexual thing there, but in any case, having these, like, strong characters, and in particular, you know, battle characters, like warriors, and yeah, I guess fighters in some ways are modern day warriors.
Hmm.
um, they, they're the limelight warriors, whereas obviously people like the armed forces, they're the ones which are not so what's the word, they're not completely
They're not so much
in
in
the
the public
limelight.
eye.
Yeah, exactly. But
Hmm.
yeah, in any case, I think yeah, I wonder if fighters see themselves that way, or if for them it's literally just, I mean, now we're talking about professional fighters, and I think what we're really delving into is more so why normal, like, everyday people do it, because that's the interesting part, I think. um
Yeah, because professional fighters do it much more as they're prize fighters at the end of the day.
yeah, exactly. I mean, all of them say, I want to be the best in the world, right? That's what majority of them would say, that especially in the UFC.
Hmm.
And majority of MMA fighters, for example, would say, oh, I want to be in the UFC because it's where the best fighters are. So as you rightly said, is prize fighting.
Yeah, and that's where sort of trash talking and everything comes into it, and it's why McGregor is arguably the most successful fighter ever, because
Yeah.
he's, or maybe Floyd Mayweather actually, if you're going to, if within MMA, Conor McGregor is the most successful fighter ever because they're prize fighters and he's made the biggest prizes.
Mm.
But I think that's kind of, I think that's fine as a personal goal. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to make a lot of money. But you know, if McGregor, I can't really knock him. If I am going to embrace the whole nihilist point of view and the absurd hero point of view, if that's what's important for him, I can't knock that. His opinion of what's important is just as valid as mine.
Yeah.
The ones that
Yeah.
interest me more are maybe people like Justin Wren. Justin Wren.
It really rings a bell, but
Yeah,
I
he's
can't
he's
picture
one
it.
of he's one of Joe Rogan's mates. He's a Bellator fighter. Used to be UFC, I think.
Mm.
And he left the UFC to go and help the pygmies in the Congo. And
Oh yes.
now what he does is he uses this platform to promote his charity and to try and do good in the world.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly which guy you're talking about now.
So I think that's the other way that fighting in general can have a point. You can have those figureheads and those champions, maybe more than
Yes.
warriors, that maybe we need as people. We need those stories. You can have these personal goals, whether it's to have faced the challenge or to have made money or to face a challenge, make money, or to just overcome these odds and to grow as a person. Or you can have it for having a platform. And once you've got that platform, if fighting is what you do well, and that's the best way for you to get that platform, you choose what's valuable to you and you create something, based on that.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.